Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're taking a closer look at something that I know a lot of you can relate to, hyperfocus.
We're really going to unpack this idea of hyperfocus, especially in the context of ADHD.
Which, by the way, is something we tend to simplify, like
Yeah.
it's all about just not being able to focus, right?
Exactly. And in preparing for this, I was looking back at some older pieces on ADHD, and it's interesting how often the strengths get kind of overshadowed.
It's true. When you hear someone with ADHD talking about those moments when they're really in the zone, totally locked in, it kind of sounds like a superpower, doesn't it?
It really can be. And that, my friend, is the heart of what we call hyperfocus.
So walk us through it. What exactly is hyperfocus? Because, we all zone out during a boring movie.
Yeah,
That's
huge difference. Think of it this way. Imagine your everyday focus is like a floodlight. It covers a broad area, but the light itself is kind of spread out, right?
okay, I'm with you.
Hyperfocus, on the other hand, that's like a laser beam, laser sharp, super intense, locked on one specific thing.
And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, it seems like, based on, I don't know, every experience I've ever had trying to, also be a functioning adult while hyper-focused.
You're hitting on a really crucial point, which is that hyperfocus is kind of like a double-edged sword.
So true. I was just thinking about that. On the one hand, there's nothing quite like that feeling of complete absorption, where you lose track of time and make these amazing breakthroughs.
And for a lot of people with ADHD, that's where their best work happens.
Oh, 100%. But then there's the flip side, where you come up for air and realize you've missed lunch, or maybe even a whole day has gone by.
It's that intensity that can make it tricky to just, shift gears when you need to.
Yeah, it's not always easy to just turn off that laser focus.
It's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it? Figuring out how to make that intensity work for you.
That's what I'm thinking, because it almost feels like you need a bit of a game plan, right? Okay, hyperfocus, I see you, but let's work together on this.
You're so right. It all starts with understanding what actually triggers those hyperfocus moments for you.
Ooh, interesting. I like that. So it's about knowing your own personal hyperfocus triggers.
Exactly. For some people, it's a specific type of task, like maybe anything super detail-oriented or something that requires a lot of creativity.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can totally lose myself in anything that lets me be creative.
And for others, it's more about the environment, like maybe they need complete silence or maybe they need music blasting to really get in the zone.
Okay, I can see that.
Hmm.
So once you know what sets you off, what then? Do you just try to avoid those triggers altogether?
Not necessarily. It's more about learning how to work with your brain, not against it.
Working with it. Okay, I like the sound of that.
It's like you wouldn't plant a tomato plant in a shady spot and expect it to thrive, right?
True. Tomatoes need sunshine.
Exactly. Your brain's kind of like that with hyperfocus. It needs the right conditions to truly flourish.
Okay, I love that analogy. So we're talking about creating the optimal hyperfocus environment.
Exactly. Think about it, a designated workspace where when you walk in, your brain knows, okay, it's go time. No distractions, no clutter, just you and whatever it is you're hyper-focusing on.
You're describing my dream workspace, by the way, because mine usually looks a lot more like, well, the opposite of that.
I hear you. But even small changes can make a world of difference. Good lighting, a comfortable chair, maybe some calming music or a white noise machine if that helps.
It's about creating that space where your brain can really, truly focus.
Exactly. But even with the perfect environment, we can't forget about time management. That's a big one.
Oh, tell me about it. Time management and hyperfocus. It's a tricky relationship.
And that's where learning some strategies can be super helpful. One that I often recommend is breaking down larger tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Okay, so it's less overwhelming that way.
Exactly. You're tricking your brain into being more productive, really.
I am all about tricking my brain into being productive. In a
Yeah.
good way, of course. Any other time management tricks up your sleeve?
Have you ever heard of the Pomodoro technique?
Oh, for sure. That one's a game changer. But for those who haven't, break it down for us.
So basically, you work in focused intervals, usually 25 minutes, followed by a short break, maybe 5 minutes or so. And you just keep repeating that cycle throughout the day.
I used to think that was a myth, honestly,
Right.
but it totally changed how I work. So we've talked about environment, time management, but what are the social side of things? Because I feel like hyperfocus can really impact our relationships sometimes.
You're absolutely right. It's something to be mindful of for sure, especially if you're prone to those really intense hyper-focus sessions where you kind of disappear from the world for a while.
It's tricky because on one hand, you don't want to make excuses for not being present or forgetting things. But on the other hand, it is a real thing, right? It's not like you're choosing to check out.
Exactly. It's not about being inconsiderate. It's about how your brain's wired.
So how do we even begin to explain that to, like, a partner or a friend who's maybe feeling a little neglected?
Communication is key. Having those open, honest conversations about what hyperfocus is and how it affects you personally.
So, like, explaining that when you're in that zone, it's not about ignoring them. It's more like your brain temporarily hit the mute button on the rest of the world.
That's a great way to put it. It's not personal, it's neurological.
Neurological. I like that and using that. Okay, so once you've had that conversation, what else?
Yeah.
Because knowing about it and then still feeling ignored are two different things, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where those strategies come in, like scheduling dedicated quality time where you are fully present, no distractions.
That makes sense. It's almost like I'm scheduling in time to not be hyper-focused so I can actually be present with the people I care about.
You got it. And setting boundaries can be huge, too. Like maybe you say, okay, from 7 to 9 p.m., I need to be in my hyper-focus zone
Right.
for this project. But after that, it's all you.
Boundaries are so important. It's about finding that balance, right? Because relationships are a two-way street.
100%. And the really cool thing is you can actually use your hyperfocus as a superpower in your relationships, too.
Oh, tell me more about that. Because I was thinking it's mostly like a recipe for disaster on the relationship front.
It doesn't have to be. Think about it. When you're hyperfocused, you're totally engaged, present, passionate. That same intensity can be channeled into, say, planning an amazing date night, or finally tackling that DIY project you've been putting off with your partner.
Okay, I'm seeing it. It's like taking all that laser focus and aiming it at something you both care about.
Exactly. And these same principles can apply in a work setting, too.
Oh, for sure. It's about finding a job or a career path that really lights up that hyper-focus, right?
And if you're in a role where you're not always hyper-focused on every single task, that's where those self-management tools we talked about earlier come into play.
The Pomodoro technique, breaking things down into smaller steps, all that good stuff.
You got it. And open communication is huge in any setting, but especially at work. Letting your colleagues and supervisors know about your working style, what you need to thrive.
Transparency is key. Okay, so before we wrap up our deep dive into hyperfocus, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. If you're someone who experiences hyperfocus, you're not alone. And it's not something to be ashamed of. It's about learning to work with your brain, not against it.
Love that. It's a superpower waiting to be harnessed.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, on that note, that's a wrap on another deep dive, everyone. Until next time, happy focusing.